The African Center for Disease Control goes for African traditional medicine as the search for COVID-19 solution continues. Teachers in Uganda have ventured in business construction amid the impact of COVID-19 as schools remain closed. And the Tunisian company has unveiled its locally made drones after 2 years of research. This and more coming on The World Today. Many thanks for joining us, and you are watching the World Today News Bulletin on Africa TV. I am Amadou Kante, and now the news in detail. And we begin with matters of the Africa CDC, because with more than 600,000 cases of COVID-19 in Africa, the virus is on stable pace in a rapid multiplication rates, according to the African Center for Disease Control. Dr. John Kengashan, director of the CDC, said in this week's press briefing that the center will launch its Committee on Traditional Medicine for COVID-19 on the 22nd July. Details of that in this report by Sona Tunkara.
As of 12th July, 64 clinical trials for COVID-19 drug were conducted in the continent. 16 experts, including 9 epidemiologists, 5 laboratories, and 2 communication specialists were deployed to Malawi and Chad by the African CDC to support the COVID-19 response effort. It could be recalled 1 week ago that a consortium for COVID-19 vaccine trial, which has more than 80 potential sites, was launched by the continent's health governing body. About half a year after the outbreak of the coronavirus global pandemic, Dr. John of the CDC argued that it was high time for Africa to take up the lead towards a cure to the virus.
If you recall, last week we announced the launch of a consortium for COVID-19 vaccine clinical trials, in abbreviation CONVAC. And this week we have already, as part of that consortium, begin to engage vaccine manufacturing companies to explore partnerships with them. It is a strong belief that Africa should play an active role in the process of development of the vaccines and uptake of the vaccines, and not wait until vaccines are developed before we distributed in Africa. So we are positioning the continent to play a coordinated role to enhance and accelerate the clinical trials of any promising vaccine candidates on the continent.
With more than 20 African countries taking part in the medical supply platform set up to enhance effective communication among communities, the center asks for concerted efforts rooting from the grassroots.
Is to increase our pace aggressively as we implement the PAC initiative, which is a partnership to accelerate COVID testing, which is underpinned by ability to test, to trace, and to treat. We need to ramp up testing. We need to trace those who are infected and isolate them and make provisions for appropriate treatment. The second thing we must do is to engage communities very actively. The battle against COVID-19 is that will be decided at a community level, and without proper community engagement, community ownership and response, we will not be able to conduct the appropriate contact tracing and care.
Globally, there is about 13 million cases recorded, with nearly 600,000 deaths. Of the global figures, 644,000 cases with about 14,000 deaths have been recorded in Africa. There has been an increased number of cases by 20%, which translates to about 119,000 new cases this week alone. A daily average of over 17,000 cases is noticeable in the weekly data from the African Center for Disease Control. For iAfrica TV, Sohna Tunkara.
Africa CDC recommits its effort in the fight against the COVID-19 global pandemic. And from that, we head to the country's capital because the National Assembly in Banjul on Thursday ran debate on the bill seeking to repeal skin bleaching as tabled by the Attorney General and Minister of Justice. Kadisine Duseka has more details of that in this report.
The skin bleaching prohibition repeal bill went on the rounds of debate at the National Assembly following its second reading by the Attorney General and Minister of Justice on Thursday. The enactment of the Women Act in 2010 brought about significant strides in the protection of women, but the existence of the skin bleaching law appears to contradict the country's record in the gender sector. Justice Minister Dauda Jallow described the act as a trailblazer, antagonizing the observance and domestication of international obligations relating to women. The amendment, he said, was intended to review as stated in the object of the bill and then repeal the Skin Bleaching Act.
This amendment is intended to review and amend as stated in the objects, but mainly it is to repeal the Skin Bleaching Act completely from our law books.
National Assembly member for Serekunda, Halifa Sallah, who supported the repealing motion, observed that the law had failed to stop people from bleaching, arguing that it was not an enforceable one.
So in that regard, Honorable Speaker, there are laws that you cannot enforce. And that is what the lawmaker tried to distinguish. What laws can we enforce to be able to prevent something? Prohibit what is implementable, what is enforceable. Promote what is in the interest of society. Protect what is in the society. That is what lawmaking is all about. Those are the pillars of lawmaking. So, Honorable Speaker, this law cannot be enforced, and it can lead to abuse. It has led to abuse, and that is why it should be repealed.
Member for Talinding Fatmata Jawara, who went against the motion, opined that bleaching causes high risks to the health of the user, which should remain prohibited by law.
Going to the health implication of skin bleaching, I think both the Ministry of Interior and Health have a heavy load of work to do. We should prohibit all form of this chemical bleaching into the country, or to stop them from designating them into the public domain, because really it has a very great health implication. On that note, Honorable Speaker, I'm totally against it. Before the repealing, we need to control the importation of this chemical into the country.
Similarly, the representative for the Busumbala constituency, Sekuba Jaju, argued that going against the repeal process does not mean going against the principles of human rights.
In as much as I want to support or go against discrimination, support human right, the supreme law of the Almighty that I believe, that is my foundation, which preaches that bleaching is prohibited. So that means I am against the repeal of this act.
The bill, which is due for a third reading, will be subjected to vote by the Assembly. A number of lawmakers had argued that the issue of skin bleaching, as practiced by many Gambian women, was better treated as social rather than legal issues. For iAfrica News, I am Khadija Tuseka.
And from the report there by Khadija Tuseka, next we head to Uganda because Ugandan schools are still shut down as per measures to contain the spread of the COVID-19 pandemic, forcing teachers to resort to other alternatives. Uganda has more than 300,000 private school teachers who are currently out of work due to the pandemic. Details of that in this report.
It's been months since Ismail Lubega stood before a class. The closure of schools due to the COVID-19 pandemic put the teacher of history out of work. Without pay for months now, he has taken on another job in construction.
As a teacher, you're supposed to be very quick in thinking. You're supposed to work very fast. Because when the situation, we realize that we don't know when COVID is going to end, we realize that we can't just sit.
Lubega is not alone. With savings from their group, These teachers purchased raw materials and are now making paving stones.
We used to sit every Thursday and we collect some money, 20,000 each, and we realized that we can use this money in COVID so that we can start instead of sharing that money.
And it is already picking on. The teachers here say they learned how to make the paving stones in a few weeks. The group can about 700 a day. People take turns to work here, and they say they can make more pavers than they already do.
We believe that we can make even 1,000 or even 2,000, but we are limited by the machinery that we have, so it becomes really hard. Like you've seen, we are so many today, but then the machinery is lacking, so we are not making the optimum that we ought to make.
Uganda has more than 360,000 private school teachers. It's still uncertain when they will return to the classrooms. And the longer schools are closed, the more Frederick Odur worries.
The teachers who have learned some of these skills, the teachers who have earned some little money from these different jobs that they have been doing, sincerely, it will be very difficult for them to go back to class. Now, and that calls for our directors, that calls for the government to come in and support the private schools so that even the salaries of the private school teachers should be increased.
For now, the fuel cells are helping Lubega and his colleagues pay their bills. That could probably go on much longer, at least until Uganda is declared coronavirus free.
Teachers in Uganda are also feeling the impact of the COVID-19 as school still remains closed. And from, of course, in Kampala, Uganda, next we head to South Africa because as the COVID-19 global pandemic continues to affect the South African aviation industry, creditors have endorsed the restructuring of the initial plans. The move is expected to mitigate the impact or the economic pressure rather and open a window for further engagement with partners, according to members of the unions in the country. Here's more details of that.
There are questions about the fleet, as an estimated 35 aircraft have been returned to their owners. The rescue plan is also vague on funding for new aircraft.
There's nothing in there that talks about, provisions for leasing new aircraft or acquiring new aircraft. There's nothing in there that talks about provisions for training of crew. There's nothing in there that talks specifically about how we're going to bankroll the losses of the initial years before they can turn a profit, if they can turn a profit.
The unions are relieved that the business rescue process is almost over.
We now have a lot of work to do, particularly with regards to the plan itself. There are some aspects of the plan that we're not entirely satisfied with, but we believe that some of those issues we'll be able to work through engagement together with the Department of Public Enterprises.
However, the COVID-19 pandemic has added additional pressure to the rescue plan.
So the very first thing that has to happen is government has to take a decision on reopening our borders and allowing for flights to start to resume. Because there's no point going off and signing leases on aircraft if the airplanes are just going to sit dormant on the ground. Similarly, there's no point starting to train up staff, pilots and cabin crew, if they're just going to lose their competency by sitting on the ground.
One of the other sticking points is likely to be the new interim CEO, Philip Saunders. His appointment was announced by the Public Enterprises Department.
Particularly because Philip Saunders is a member of the very same executive which has overseen the collapse of SAA. And we were very clear in our engagements with the DPE that this new South African Airways must be new in the true sense of the word. It must be new in the sense that it must be run by a completely new team of executives that don't have the baggage of the current executives.
With that letter of commitment from the government, it seems that SAA is going to find a new lease of life.
And that's the other thing, is government really spending the money wisely when we've got an entire aviation industry and infrastructure in the country that's on the verge of collapse? Airports need funding desperately. Air traffic navigation service needs money desperately. Our civil aviation authority, which is the safety watchdog, is on its knees financially, all because they depend on revenue provided by airline passengers and airlines.
That report there in South Africa. And South Africa, of course, takes us to the break, and we will be back right after with more news ahead. Stay tuned. Welcome back, and you're watching the World Today News Bulletin on Africa TV. And now to the rest of the stories. Now, the Gambia's Minister of Health on Thursday announced confirmation of 14 new cases of the coronavirus, 8 of whom are health workers. The latest news brings the total number of cases since March to 78. There are 41 active cases under treatment, while 34 have successfully recovered with 3 deaths. Meanwhile, 316 new persons have been taken into quarantine, bringing the total number to 663. And from that report from the Minister of Health, next we talk on the Minister of Finance, because the Minister of Finance and Economic Affairs on Wednesday told members of the National Assembly that the implementation of the international donors of the National Development Plan relating to the international grants is on course. Mamburin Jai was responding questions from members as to the level of progress made on the implementation of the donor funds. Our Maklo has more details of that in this report.
Before the lawmakers at the National Assembly on Wednesday was the Minister of Finance and Economic Affairs for questions relating to the grants from international donors in the implementation of the National Development Plan, otherwise known as the NDP. Mamburin Jai explains that the plan is on course with over $100 million, representing 12% disbursement rate of the pledge toward the implementation process.
And so far, a total of $199.57 million has been disbursed towards the implementation of the NDP, representing a 12% disbursement rate of the pledge amount. Below, we have the table and the contributing countries that pledge. They are Belgium, France, Italy, that's UNICEF, Japan, Korea, Malta, Qatar, Turkey, UAE, United Kingdom, USA, AFDB, Badia, EU Investment Bank, ISDB, OFIT, World Bank, WTO, ITC, and the UN Peace Building Fund.
The amount generated so far comprises of loans with its condition posing as challenges in the drive along the country's blueprint.
I think what we are confronted and faced with is some of it are blended, loans and grants. So the whole strategy is to delink. My priority is make sure I have the grants as a priority from loan. If you look at exactly the actuals for the 199, the grant element so far disbursed is 163,603,449, as opposed to the loans only 35. It's a deliberate policy from our side, given the fact that our debt GDP ratio is very high. And what we've insisted, even if we delink it, that loan, we want to make sure minimum threshold is 50% grant.
In response to the causes of delay in fulfillment of the pledges from bilateral and multilateral partners to the NDP, the finance minister responded that the slow motion is a reflection on the side of the donors committee.
No, we are not slow to actually make the request, because immediately after the pledging session, we did make the request, and that everything is based on our plan. most of the time is at the donor end. They also have their own issues. Sometimes they will go and realize that the spread, that the amount of money that is supposed to be disbursed based on their own internal procedure. Most of the time, that's where the delay is. Now we are trying to take a more aggressive move to make sure that, especially the grants, that's why I said, not only we want the grants, but we want it to be front-loaded.
The rationale behind the Gambia's National Development Plan 2018-2021 is meant to deliver good governance and accountability, social cohesion, and national reconciliation in the post-Jammeh era. The government of the Gambia, since the coming of the Barrow administration, has received pledges in millions of dollars grants from international organizations to realize the essence of the NDP. For iAfrica TV News, Awa Makalu.
And from the report there, of course, from matters of the National Assembly, next we head to Tunisia, because a Tunisian company has released its maiden locally made drones that could operate in security and agriculture-related services. According to the producers, the drones can operate 24 hours a day for a distance of more than 700 kilometers. The company's technical director said the drones will be exposed to the international market. Here's more details of that.
Mohamed Frikha is a successful engineer and entrepreneur. The founder of Telnet Holding expressed his pride after he led a team of Tunisian technicians and successfully manufactured a drone at a local research unit.
It's the first time in Tunisia's history that an autonomous drone is 100% produced with Tunisian expertise at Telnet. It can operate in agriculture, security, and enable equipment delivery to inaccessible areas and also border surveillance.
The project coordinator says this autonomous drone can fly up to 8 hours and operate 24 hours per day. It is capable of flying over a distance of 800 kilometers.
This drone weighs 50 kilograms. It can carry a 10-kilogram multi-purpose payload, including a camera and other components for distant destinations and missions.
Telnet's technical director asserts that the company plans to export the drone to the international market.
We target the international market. We'll export our product to many countries in the Middle East region, as well as African countries, where there's a huge demand for this drone, which can offer many services.
The drone is equipped with an automatic flight system, as well as remote control and anti-collision system. The research and manufacture project for the first Tunisian drone was launched at Telnet Laboratories 2 years ago. The company is now expecting the drone certification to begin the first test flights in many regions across the North African state.
Well, viewers, from that inspiring report in Tunisia, we finally brings this news bulletin to an end. But for more details on this and other stories, as always, you can log on our website on africa.tv. Well, once again, many thanks for the pleasure of your company. Thanks for watching. Stay safe and bye for now.
si ñëw bi nga ñëw seet si suma tabax gi kontaan naa ci trop trop. maa gën a kontaan bi ma ñëwee fekk sa tabax bi toll fii waaye nag man kontaanuma ci sama kër gi man. lu xew ndax umpale wu loon ñoo bokkoon nekk Europe. dëgg la jamono yu ñu nekkee foofu yëpp man ak yow maa ngi am benn waay maa ngi ko yónnee xaalis bu bari pour mu sampal ma suma kër. te ba léegi tabax bi àggul fenn. te yow nga waxoon ma ne ma bi nga starté samp yàggul léegi nga toll fii foo jaar. li waral loolu nag mooy dama ànd ak waa Baluwo. kon su ma la déggee Baluwo dañuy yëngu ci samp kër tamit. ni ngay def nag yomb na da ngay log on to www.baluwo.com mun ngaa jënd ci ñoom ciment suuf banta weñ ba ci daaj yi nga xam ne di nga ko soxla lépp lu jëm ci wàllu samp rek mun nga koo am ci lu yomba ak Baluwo daal yaay dugal sa xaalis fi nga ko bugga amee ko ci ni nga ko buggee.
Benyu jaje holla birde tale naga kure chondi benyu kana mo kide